How many Iraqis did Americans kill yesterday? I would say probably almost none.
Aren't the numbers quite exorbitantly different?
Forget it. You wouldn't believe anything.
I'm just saying.
Well, we're talking to this guy here.
It's
We're talking about America being kind.
Yeah.
Okay, to return to my previous remarks, Judaism does not claim to possess the exclusive revelation of eternal truth. It is true in a way. Jews don't even agree among themselves. If a rabbi tells me anything, I just say, you know what, Rabbi, take a flying jump. I know what I am, what it is to be a Jew as far as I'm concerned, if I am a Jew or whatever. You can't tell me anything that I can't discover myself, or I don't know myself, and I'm not going to go by what you say anyway. But that's not an argument. What I'm trying to say is that Jews don't agree on the eternal principles. Jews don't even know if they believe in resurrection of the dead or they don't. They're supposed to, but I'm sure most Jews don't. They don't know what they believe. They just know that they're honoring a tradition of some kind that to them has proven worthy to some extent. That's all I think most of them know. 2 days ago was Yom Kippur. Did everyone fast? No, I don't think so. But probably most didn't go to work, and most didn't come to school here, and if we had a class yesterday, I wouldn't have been here. Not last night, it wasn't Yom Kippur, but during the day was, and the night before. But what does Yom Kippur mean to me? Almost nothing, except to show respect for traditions. Because frankly, I know you're saying it's egotistical. I said that to my kids' family. I don't believe there's anything I need to atone for recently that I've done that I haven't already atoned for plenty of other times. So, I've done a lot of atoning in my life, and I don't have to keep on atoning, frankly, but I'll pay the respect. But I don't think that was what the holiday originally was. The holiday originally was for, I don't even believe in sin, quite frankly. I don't believe in sin. Who takes that Whitman course with me? You took it, and Whitman said there is no sin. I'm on his side on that. I don't believe in the sin as such. I don't like the word, but the holiday was originally supposed to have been for sins, I think, out of a communal way, like he's speaking about of this country, to atone for communal sins of the whole society, or inadvertent sins. Sins you may have committed without knowledge. Other sins that you knew about, you were supposed to go up to the temple and bring a bird or something, or some other thing like that. You were supposed to, make a sin offering or whatever. If you knew what the sin was, you don't need the Day of Atonement. So the Day of Atonement was a different kind. Now Jews generally, that's what I mean, Jews don't even know what they're doing half the time. There is no, like he said, no dogma. There's no central body of Judaism that everyone recognizes. There is no theology as such that applies to everybody. So that's what Mendelssohn is saying. So he has some basis. And even the legislation now, he obviously had a great respect for the legislation, the Mosaic legislation. But most Jews I know are certainly, the rabbinic legislation is not Mosaic legislation. I mean, let's face it, the rabbis in the 2nd century or 1st century, around the time of birth of Christianity, had the proposition you should build a fence around the Torah. That is, they made the Torah even more strict, and they extended it so they wouldn't inadvertently incur some infraction or sin. So, for instance, they took a thing like, you shall not see the kid in its mother's milk, and developed all the laws of kashrut on the basis of that. But that is total nonsense as far as I personally am concerned. You shouldn't see the kid in its mother's milk. It's just a matter of cruelty to animals. How can you be so cruel as to take a kid and boil it in its own mother's milk? But then they went on to say you shouldn't eat milk and meat together. You shouldn't eat cheese and flesh. You should have separate knives and forks, separate plates, and so on and so forth. This is what kashrut really means to most religious-minded Jews. So they went far, far beyond it. And to get back to what I'm saying, the laws, most of those laws, rabbinical laws, I think most Jews, except some very religious, faithful ones, don't observe. Now, do Jews drive on Sabbath? Do they stop working on Sabbath? I think 75% don't even observe that. They might light candles on Sabbath, but they'll do whatever has to be done on Sabbath. Even sometimes they'll work on the Sabbath. You know, there's Jewish ball players. Sandy Koufax wouldn't pitch on Yom Kippur, but I'm sure this other Jewish ball player that was recently in the news, he's out there playing, you know. So, you know, it depends on the individual Jewish person. What other laws can we point to that are pretty obviously being broken? Sabbath. Oh, do Jews you know eat lobsters and shrimp? I got to tell you, my mother came from what the Jews call, I didn't know the word when I was young, yekka. A yekka in Israel is a German Jew. A German Jew were the most liberated kinds of Jews. They had been undergone the enlightenment of Mendelssohn here and then Reformed Judaism. My mother not only ate shrimp, she loved shrimp. She would go out of her way to eat shrimp. But she never doubted the fact that she was Jewish, you see. But now an Orthodox Jew would be horrified by her. You know, so this is what I mean. Do most Jews observe even the Mosaic legislation? Only, I think, a central cadre really observed the Mosaic legislation today. Maybe I would say, if 10 or 15%, that would be lucky. They would say some of it. Now, like Spinoza said, you take something like circumcision, and Spinoza basically said that at one point that if we're just circumcision, the Jews would still exist. Not to make it crude or anything, but I think he's right there. All Jews observe circumcision. Just about all Jews observe circumcision. They don't know why, they just do it. It's just like an immutable tradition, period. And Hitler knew that, and therefore he pulled down their trousers and things like that to see who he was going to go after. But the point was, you know, it's just immutable. So if you take a law like that, and no one can tell you why. No one can tell you why. Now, if you want to call that a natural principle, you say, well, men should have been born that way, or whatever. But today we find that circumcision is helpful in certain disease situations where AIDS and other things are concerned, because obviously keeping cleanliness in that part of the body is more difficult than the other parts of the body. So there can be medical reasons, perhaps, that was originally behind. Yeah.
I'm just trying to appropriate Mendelssohn's point here. Is he saying this as a defense for the Jews' ability to basically assimilate into society?
Absolutely. That's exactly what he's doing. That is what he's doing. You've got it in a nutshell.
Okay.
So we maybe don't have to do his arguments, but I think we should do his arguments. So we'll just continue. But this is why I'm just talking about, he's saying Judaism is divine legislation. And I'm saying, well, yeah, but it's hardly even that. Most Jews don't even observe the legislation, but they still feel that they're Jewish in some way. You know, they say. Rosh Hashanah, which just passed 10 days before Yom Kippur, it's supposed to be the head of the, Rosh means head, Shana means year, and I like to tell my students that, in fact, most of you may know this, but Rosh Hashanah is not the New Year. It's the first day of the 7th month. It is not the New Year. The New Year is around the time of Passover. That's the first month, around the time of Passover. So, well, why do everyone go around saying Happy New Year? It's tradition. What is the tradition behind it? What Rosh Hashanah was the beginning of the prayer cycle in the temple. That the prayer cycle would renew itself on that day. The 7th month is actually a holy month. The Muslims have, how should we put it, absorbed it and changed it slightly, and they call it Ramadan. For them, it's the 8th month. what is Ramadan? And they fast, and they at night they eat and they fast. So they've taken Yom Kippur and they extended it throughout the whole month. But why is the 7th month that we're in now and just passing through it, Sukkot, Tabernacles, is yet to come? What is happening? What is the culmination of Tabernacles? Why do the Hasidic Jews up in Long Beach Boulevard there dance in the middle of Sukkot? What is it they're dancing over?
Harvest.
No, that's what the rabbinic. That's what the Reform Jews reinterpreted as. What are they dancing over? By the way, it was the second harvest. You are right, but the basis of the Sukkot was Simchat Torah, the joy of the Torah. That the booths were the prelude to the revelation in Sinai, and that's what Ramadan is. Ramadan commemorates the revelation of the Quran. Sukkot actually is supposed to commemorate the revelation of the Torah. So you're in the booths getting ready for the revelation. So how does the month work then? The first day, it proclaims the beginning of this holy month. The 10th day, you do atonement to make sure you got no sins hanging around that you didn't know about or you should have made atonement for or whatever. And then you get into the serious stuff, the tabernacles, getting ready for the revelation of the law. So that's really what the 7th month is for Judaism. But no Jew knows this. Any Jew in the room here, most of you probably don't even know this. No one teaches it to you. It took me probably about 45 in these classes to discover it myself. No one taught it to me when I was young or anything like that. So, so he's quite right to think that Sukkot is a harvest festival, because that's how, for instance, Reform Judaism, they have a big booth with pumpkins and vegetables hanging off it like it's just a harvest festival, because they don't do the Simchat Torah, because they don't observe the whole Torah, Reform Judaism. In any case, to get back to this holy month and the Muslim appropriation of it. So the Muslims just moved it up to the 8th month, but it is not the new year. It's the beginning of the prayer cycle in the temple. And it's really what it is. If you want to get down to it, how we use it. It's the beginning of the academic year. The prayer cycle can be compared to the academic year, the beginning of the teaching cycle of the Torah. So it really is just like we use it, the beginning of the academic year. That's what it is. And it is not the beginning, it is not the new year, it is not the first month. First month is Passover year, Passover. Yeah.
Don't they start rereading the Torah on Simchat Torah though, I thought?
Probably, I don't know which day in the middle, but they start somewhere in there. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Somewhere in that month they started. Probably you're right. Again, that shows how ignorant I am. I am admit ignorance, and this is, I'm telling you, most Jews are totally ignorant of their religion.
And again, the prayer cycle is different than the actual reading.
Anyway, the Reform and Conservatives we're going to get to change all that in any case. So we'll see what we can make of it. But that's a good point. Thanks. Okay, so it's a revealed legislation. The voice that was heard on Sinai did not say, "I am the eternal God. You're the necessary autonomous being, omnipotent, omniscient, who rewards men in the future according to their works." I don't know if that's a universal truth that's discoverable by reason. I never saw God rewarding anyone in the future according to anything. I hope He does, but I'm not sure he or she does. This is the universal religion of mankind, not Judaism. Wow, I forgot the faith versus works debate in Christianity.
You think he's being satirical?
No, I don't. I think he's being deadly serious here.
I was almost wondering if he was being satirical.
No, maybe you asked me what I think. I think he's just not a simple person, but in some ways very simple, naive, decent person, trying to use the arguments of his day to make Judaism as attractive as possible for people to think of it as a weird, benighted superstition with these weird, customs like dressing in a bizarre manner, or circumcision, which they would have thought was quite bizarre. These rituals that look like, primitive totem rituals of some kind. and as opposed to our great Christian customs of whatever it is that any Christian believes is greater than other religions. I can't address that. It's up to the individual person. This is the universal religion of mankind, not Judaism. This is universal religion, without which man can neither be virtuous or happy, is, was not, and in fact could not have been revealed on Sinai. Who needed the sound of thunder and trumpets, blah, 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 blah. He takes the Bible literally, too. To be convinced that he's a very decent, sweet, I think, kind man, who's trying to be as reasonable as he can. Okay, so finally, the sophist, the philosopher, demands rational proofs, not miracles. And even the great teacher of our religion, if he could awaken all the dead, etc., to confirm an eternal truth, the skeptic would say, the teacher has revived many dead, yet I still know no more about eternal truth than I knew before. And so on. I personally agree with that in some ways. It doesn't matter if someone, to my mind, does miracles or not. I mean, I don't think miracles are possible, but suppose someone could do something that you thought was an impressive miracle. That it's supposed to convince people of the truth of a certain proposition. He's saying, no, that doesn't convince me of the truth of any proposition. And that's something to think about. Miracles convince, people on a mass level often, but not a reasonable person, I think he said. Look here, miracles, extraordinary signs, further along, according to Judaism, are not proofs for or against eternal truth. You see that paragraph? Miracles, what page is that?
Top of 99.
Okay, so just to keep everyone on the same page. So in Judaism, miracles doesn't prove anything. The man who performs miracles must be condemned to death if he misleads into idolatry, in fact, he says. Judaism does have laws like that to people who are magicians and so on and so on. I don't believe anyone should be condemned to death for anything. I think you should be have a good sense of humor and let him do whatever he wants to do. And as he goes along like that, he says, another page or so, among the precepts and ordinance of the Mosaic law, there is none saying you shall believe, you shall not believe. You see, there he's getting into conflict with falling faith and Islam. I forget how it's put in by Islam. Allah ilaha illa Allah, there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is Rasulullah, the messenger of God. So you have to believe everything Muhammad says in Islam. That's what the confession of the faith says. It doesn't just say like Judaism. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord, our God, the Lord is one. Affirming the oneness of God, whether you believe in that or not, is I'm not getting into here. It goes on, Islam, to say Muhammad is the only true path, and Muhammad is the Rasulullah. Judaism doesn't go beyond the first step. So he thinks Judaism is admirable. It doesn't say you shall believe. It only says you shall do. I agree with it. It's works oriented, and I've always said that Jamesian Christianity is works oriented. That's my whole point about the difference of Pauline Christianity and Jamesian Christianity. That is, show me your, as the James letter says to the Paul type character, show me your works. I'm not interested in your faith and your belief. Show me your works. I'll get you in. Chuck Colson, the dirty tricks guy from Nixon. He can get Christ, and let's see your works. Your belief doesn't really impress me. Deathbed conversion, anything like that, like Constantine, I don't consider that valid. And that's what he's saying. Show me what you do. And I think that's I've seen in the work I've done on the scrolls. That's a really important aspect of the issue. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier about that miracles were never performed to.
I didn't say. He said it.
Right. When you're reading from this, that the miracles weren't done in order to show a truth or something yet. Aren't there incidents in the Old Testament where, like Moses performing, giving this
Absolutely.
the sign before Pharaoh, or Elijah with priestess?
Yeah, he's stretching it. Yeah, he's stretching it. He's stretching it. But you see, he's basically saying what most Jews think. I mean, he's not saying all Jews think this way. He's saying for him, he's saying miracles, extraordinary signs are not proofs of eternal verdicts. Even if Moses did do these ridiculous things like throw a stick down and turn into a snake and things like that, you know, these what I would and a lot of other modern-minded people would consider superstitious mixed in with you know, other parts of the religious presentation, and Elijah doing supernatural things, etc., and Jesus and so on, and all the others who are supposed to do supernatural things like walk on waters or, you know, exorcise evil spirits, if there is such a thing as an evil spirit. I'm not even sure there is. But anyway, the point being, he's saying in Christianity, and I'm not saying that he's right here, you have to decide, that's supposed to prove something, that Jesus is the Son of God, and that you're supposed to, you know, therefore, if you are faith in him, you're saved, and so on. That's supposed to prove something. In Judaism, Moses sticking his hand into his shirt and pulling it out again, what is it supposed to prove? It doesn't have any, there's nothing there that it proves.
Well, like in the case of Elijah specifically, where
What's the Elijah miracle you're talking about?
where he
Resurrects people. That's what you're
No,
talking about.
actually, I was talking about the one where he goes before the same I think it was the priests and priestesses of Baal, and
Eats up their God or whatever.
no, they were both to set out a sacrifice, and whoever's God would light up the fire was the true God, so to speak. And they'd go and the Baals
Yeah.
try to call up their God, and it doesn't work. And Elijah has the whole thing soaked down for his sacrifice, and the fire comes down from heaven and burns up the whole thing.
Well, I have to be honest with you. I do think Elijah is the prototype for Jesus in the scripture. Both are supposed to be doing the same kinds of things. You know, whatever you believe, Jesus or not, or Elijah or not, I do think one character is not possible without the presentation of the other. But I do think these are literary aspects. These are not historical truths in terms of what Mendelssohn is saying. And I don't think Mendelssohn would think that was an important aspect of Judaism. In Christianity, he's saying it's a central aspect. Elijah's just one of numerous heroes in Judaism, maybe one of 50 or 60 you can mention. And it's just one of the folk stories that was retained about him. And I don't think most Jews would put any particular credence or importance to it. Forgive me for saying that. It is, I think, though, it is a prototype for the gospel presentation of Jesus. Most of the miracles Elijah does are more or less the kind of miracles Jesus does, and then Jesus goes on and does quite a few more. But Elijah is the one who first resurrects people from the dead and does that kind of stuff. In Judaism, again, you call Jews dull-witted or whatever. I don't think it impresses Jews except very highly religious ones. Most average Jews you'll meet, and again, I don't know how many in the class here are Jewish, but they could support me in saying this. Most average Jews you'll meet are not terribly excited about that aspect of Judaism. I mean, the fact that Moses' stick turned into a snake more excites Cecil B. DeMille, or the fact of the parting of the Red Sea. People like Cecil B. DeMille love that stuff, but I don't think most Jews really are terribly excited about it. That's my honest opinion. I think Jews really like, and Christians too, the prophets, the written prophets, Isaiah, Ezekiel, Amos, Hosea. I think that's the real bedrock of exciting Judaism. The story, the folk stories, you know, that's just to encourage people more. Anyway, you're right. It's there, and he makes light of it because he wants to argue for acceptance. We're not a threat. As this, who was saying that here? Someone capsulized that here a moment ago. It was you, wasn't it? One of you.
Saying that who's not
That what he's trying to do is.
It's Trevor.
Who was it?
Trevor in the back.
Okay, Trevor, it's you.
You gotta say it.
It's you, it's you. Okay, so let's go on here. Let's see. Although the divine books which we see through Moses is essentially a book of laws, it also includes some rational truth, or religious precepts. So he keeps on going forward and back here and so on. Anyway, all these excellent notions address themselves not to our ability to believe, but to our capacity to understand and reflect. That's what he says. Now, you may not disagree. Maybe Judaism doesn't do that. His Judaism does. Among the precepts and ordinances of the Mosaic Law, there is none saying you shall believe, you shall not believe. It only says do or don't do. So it's legislation, it's an act, it's a social thing. It is not, you see, there it is. We don't have any instruction in the Mosaic legislation that you should believe such and such or not believe. I'm not sure he's right there, but I think most Jews, in the way they practice their faith, modern Jews would agree with it. I'm not sure Orthodox Jews would agree with it. I'm sure if you went to the Chabad up here in Long Beach, they'd find something to argue with him here about. They wouldn't accept what he was saying. So all the commandments of the divine law are addressed to your will. That is, and he goes on in some very famous examples. That is, have you the will to do or not do something, refrain or do charity or whatever. For this reason, he goes on, Judaism has no symbolic books, no articles of faith. Maimonides tried to bring in articles of faith. You see, we do not require the affirmation of specific doctrines. This is what he's trying to, he's writing this to non-Jews. He wants to tell them this is why we are not a threat. We do not require specific doctrines. In fact, we consider this practice incompatible with the true spirit of Judaism. Getting into a new idea, the spirit of Judaism. And later on, we're going to hear about the zeitgeist. The spirit of the age, spirit of the time. Geist is spirit, zeit is time. That's not going to be Mendelssohn, that's going to be the next generation of thinkers after him, following Hegel and other German thinkers. So he's already starting to talk about the spirit of the age, the true spirit of Judaism. Now, Maimonides, we mentioned Maimonides in this class. When did Maimonides live? 1200s. Time of the Third Crusade. Contemporary of Richard the Lionhearted and Saladin. It's an easy way to understand it. He tried to do this. I think he brought in 13 articles of faith. And he mentioned some other thinkers after him who tried to do this kind of thing. And Kabbalists, he goes through a lot of the thinkers here who were interested in trying to get some theological principles. You know, what do they believe? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And he finally says, like Jesus in Scripture or a lot of other people, love your neighbor as yourself. This is the entire law. The rest is commentary, something that is attributed in rabbinic literature to the teacher Hillel, an early contemporary of Jesus, a predecessor of Jesus. And I, in my scrolls class and other classes, I've shown people, historical Jesus class, many of you are taking that loving your neighbor is righteousness towards your fellow man. It's in the, it's part of the Essene practices, it's part of the Dead Sea Scrolls, it's part of the James letter. Loving God, or piety, is loving God. Piety towards God is loving God. Righteousness towards your fellow man is loving your fellow man. So the two love commandments, that's basically what he comes down to. That's all that we need to observe in Judaism. Our doctrines are part of a living tradition, and now he goes on to the oral law, which is transmitted orally, which is what the rabbis talk about, the oral law as side by side with the written law. Okay, I've got to move along here. There's an awful lot here that you could get into in this second chapter. I'm going to let you read most of it yourself and get a little bit, almost about 10 pages from the end. So, okay. Now I come to a point at which I can elucidate my hypothesis about the purpose of ceremonial law in Judaism. Our people's patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, had remained faithful to the eternal and tried to preserve pure religious concepts free of idolatry for their families and descendants. And then their descendants were chosen by providence to be a nation of priests. That's why they have special laws, the Bible says, that they shall be a nation of priests within mankind. And so that's what the ceremonial law of Judaism, as you'll see, is all about. And that's really what the Jewish conception is. The special laws that the Jews have only apply to them in terms of purity regulations, like Brahmins in Hinduism or the Persian Magi or something. The Jewish nation was supposed to observe certain special laws to keep a certain kind of priestly purity. We have seen how difficult it is to preserve. I don't know what page are we on here.
I see the ceremonial law was to induce personal converse in the contract. That's 128.
What page do you have there?
Is that where you
Oh,
are?
somewhere there.
No,
Yeah.
that's 128. And then it says, 126, the top 126. Now I can summarize briefly my concerns.
Yeah, that's it. 126 is what I just read. So we're around 126. We have seen how difficult it is to preserve abstract religious concepts by use of permanent symbols. To correct these defects, the lawgiver gave the ceremonial laws to the nation. That is, it's so difficult to pass on truths. Therefore, he just did it in one go. This was the fundamental purpose and aim of the law. Eternal truths, they were only to be associated with deeds, works, what you did. Okay, let's go on here. Now, let's see. He's talking about his friend's question before he gets into the final summary that he comes here at the end of the essay. On the basis of this premise, my friend's question had to be redefined. Would I not want to be assured by a revelation that I would be exempt from finite misery in the life to come? My answer is no. This kind of misery can only be a well-deserved chastisement. But what if the All-Merciful were to cancel a person's well-deserved punishment? You see, that's what the Christian, he thinks, basically, faith is. If you believe on Jesus Christ, all this is going to be canceled out. And again, Mendelssohn is unlike his children. He won't accept that bargain. He says, no. If there's going to be punishment for things I did, I deserve to have it. I don't think it should be canceled out. That's what he says there. Now he goes on to a summary of Judaism, which is the last probably the last 10 pages or so. And probably it's the easiest and best 10 pages in his essay because he puts his position straightforward. Let me summarize my conception of Judaism. A, can you find me where we are? What page is this? Religious doctrines, tenets, eternal truths about God, etc. That's A.
126.
126? Yeah. About God, His rule, providence, without which man cannot be enlightened or happy. These were forced upon our people under a threat of eternal and temporal punishment. But they were addressed to man's reason only, his rational understanding. These truths could not have been inspired through direct revelation. I don't know what he's talking about there. He seems to be contradicting himself. Okay, B, we've had already historical truths. And we already did. These historical accounts disclose the fundamental blah, blah, blah. We had that. C, laws, precepts, commandments, rules of conduct, peculiar to this people. That's a new category. The one because they were, God, I'm totally confused here. Anyway. These laws were revealed, the ones peculiar to the people. And most of them are ceremonial, as he goes on to state in the next paragraph. God. He's got me confused here.
He's talking about a certain relationship that God had to the Jews that was peculiar to them, in contrast to God as a universal God.
Okay, I take your word because of the priestly function. The same principle, well, let me find a good place to pick up some other stuff. Okay, hence, further along here. It is evident that a man must be quite unfamiliar with the Mosaic laws and the constitution of Judaism if he believes that they bestow rights and power upon the church, or authorize temporal punishment for unbelief, back to his unbelief or heterodoxy, back to his fear of excommunication or other temporal punishments even worse than that. Like Mr. Marshall again, back to Mr. Marshall. Are therefore far from the truth which they think I have abrogated Judaism by my arguments. One truth cannot clash with another truth. What divine law commands, reason no less divine cannot abrogate. Blah, blah, blah. So there's no conflict again between reason and divine truth. Further along, this Constitution existed only once. It's a Mosaic Constitution relative to us as a people alone. It doesn't have to do with anybody else. Let's see, I've said the Mosaic Constitution did not persist long in its original purity. And then he's going on about the nation. So here, there's nothing new here that I can find. So finally, he gets to a point, again, that he wants to relate to the present time. And even today, no better advice than this can be given: render unto Caesar to Caesar, what is to God's, I guess. To the house of Jacob, just like Jesus basically said, adopt the according to the scripture, adopt the mores and constitution of the country in which you find yourself. That's an important point that becomes a guiding principle in Judaism. And it's one of the reasons I say you see the American flag in all synagogues. Adopt the mores and constitution of the country in which you find yourself. This is the leitmotif of the Enlightenment Jew coming out of the ghettos. But be steadfast in upholding the religion of your fathers. Bear both burdens as well as you can. That's his advice to the Jewish people. Adopt the constitution of the people around you, but be as steadfast as you can in following your fathers. It's probably a difficult thing to follow. Let's go here along further. Next paragraph or two. How about ancient Palestine? Okay, there were certain things in ancient Palestine, land ownership, civil institutions, that are in the law. Outside of Judea, without temple priesthood, there can be neither sacrifices nor laws of purification nor Levites to support the priests or any of all these dependent on possession of that land. But personal commandments, duties imposed on every son of Israel, which are unrelated to the temple service and land ownership in Palestine, must, as far as I can see, be strictly observed. So, once again, he's hitting without realizing on a key issue that becomes important for the next 2 or 3 centuries. That is, whether the Jews are to be a landed people, or if you like, a dispossessed people, a wandering people, a spiritual people, a citizen of any country wherein they live. Now that will be the issue in the next century of the people following Mendelssohn. It will be the issue between Reform Judaism and Orthodox Judaism. It will be the issue between Reform and Conservative Judaism that we'll study in the next few sessions. That Rudowski summarizes quite well in his book. Now, look, something I'm going to tell you even before we get to it, which is crucial. When the Reformed Jews break away from the Orthodox Jews in Germany, in the next generation, in the early 1800s, and we have the quotes we'll get from this Modern Jewish History book. Israel Jacobson is a key person in this situation. He starts a new synagogue in a place called Sissons, and he institutes a new prayer book. The main thing that he wants to get rid of is any particularism that relate to Jews as Jews only. And so he deletes the prayer for the return to Zion from the prayer book. That is, Jews always sort of have this prayer, almost every prayer service, next year in Jerusalem, or something to that effect in their prayer service. He says that's incompatible with our desire to be good German citizens. And when Napoleon starts to ask the Jews of France, are you Frenchmen or are you Jews? We will read that next time. The Jews say we're Frenchmen of the Mosaic persuasion. Well, the point is he's inadvertently hitting on the whole issue. And what happens when Theodor Herzl comes at the end of the 19th century, he says he is a Reformed Jew of the extreme kind. He is totally assimilated. But he says just basically, he doesn't say it in so many words, what the Reformed Jews threw out, we have to reinstitute. Because we can never become Frenchmen, Germans, or any of these other things. They will not have us. And he says he reaches this conclusion from witnessing the humiliation of Dreyfus and the Dreyfus trial and the degrading of Dreyfus's military buttons and everything, and the shrieking, howling mob that loves this. And then he says he goes home with grip with a new idea, that the Jews cannot stay in Europe. They must leave Europe, and they must return to Zion. That's the only thing open to the Arabs saying, no. Don't return to Zion, go to America. You Jews who came here from Europe, you have no right to come here. We'll accept the Oriental Jews. Okay, fine. That's the Palestinian propaganda here. We'll accept the Oriental Jews, but we're not going to accept any of you Jews from Europe. You don't belong in the Middle East. You're going to all have to go. We don't care where you go. Go back to where you came from or go to America. So this is the issue of the 20th and 21st century. Zionism. Just the thing that they throw out of the prayer book, the Zionists say, that's the salvation of the Jewish people. The salvation of the Jewish people is territoriality. Is, how should we put it in a different way, is to be a landed people again. Now, I think, and I think many evangelical Christians agree with me, that they didn't deal with the issue of the temple properly. And I am not believing in priesthoods, animal sacrifice, all that kind of stuff. But there are certain symbolic things that are very meaningful to the people, that are very important for spirit, Elaine, an excited allegiance and passionate feeling of commitment, put it that way. Now, when the Jews went through the Six-Day War in 1967, I witnessed that. I went to Israel the next week, not because I wanted to go there. I had already been planned to go on a Hebrew language course for my graduate studies. I thought I wouldn't be able to go, but the war was over so quickly I was able to go. It was a program that I won a fellowship for. And I went, and I was there after the Six-Day War, and I saw the situation. And they gave the Temple Mount back to the Arabs or Muslims or Palestinians, whatever you want to call them. They weren't called Palestinians much at that time. Almost in an ill-considered manner. They didn't consider Diane, who was the defense minister, wanted to make the grand jest, sort of like the kind of thing that you think is important, and said, give the Muslims back the Temple Mount. Now, many evangelical Christians feel that that's a terrible error, and I frankly believe that for the Jewish people, it was probably a devastating error in terms of, because I don't think any self-respecting people would have done that. If you're going to go through all this suffering, and you're going to go back to the homeland of your fathers and so on, and you have the good fortune to take in very fairly bloodless manner the thing people have been praying for 2,000 years, and then you just give it back to someone else who it isn't even that important to, because they make a big thing of the Temple Mount now, but basically Mecca and Medina and the Shiite shrines in Iraq are important. Temple Mount was a never important shrine in Islam. It's a very secondary affair. And it's a central affair to the Jewish people. Doesn't mean you should throw Muslims off it or anything like that, but you certainly should not have ceded a sovereignty over it. if you in fact were a Zionist. Now, the problem is that these people were not ideological. The people in Israel were labor Zionists, people who had come to where they were at through a socialist view of the world, and they felt you didn't need these symbols. You didn't need these trappings. I think that that is going to be a very unfortunate decision in the next 100 years. There's no way to change that now. There's no way to go back in time. There's no way to revert that. This is what you were saying and what we were saying. There's a time taken out its flood leads on to fortune. You can't like do the Lebanon War the way they did things and so on, pounding downtown Beirut and stuff like that. It's the wrong time, it's the wrong strategy. And I don't think they're ever going to be able to undo that. And that's going to have ultimately a very unnerving effect on the Jewish people and a very exciting effect on the Muslim world if they are in possession of that area. I'm not saying it's wrong or right. All I'm trying to say is that if you care about the spiritual effect of things, some decisions are not taken in a wise way. You want to be fair, you can say, okay, you control your part of it, we'll control our part of it, blah, blah, blah. There are ways of working out fairness, but to have ceded that whole area back when it was the central love of your whole people for so long, and you have the Wailing Wall that they were sort of crying at, if you like, for 20 centuries, to my mind is a tremendous historical error. And this is what Mendelssohn's saying here. Either you're going to be a landed people, and sometimes landed people do pretty nasty things, or things that aren't totally fair, like America has done in going from New Jersey to California, and certainly the Mexicans and Native Americans have been borne the brunt of a lot of that. Either you're going to be a landed people for better or for worse, and we all live here in California on stolen ground, let's face it. And I don't want to get into that issue, but we're happy to be here, unfortunately, and so I don't have any way to resolve this issue. But the Jews are either going to be a landed people, or they're going to be what he's talking about here. And he feels that this is all in the past. Outside of Judea, without temple, you see, temple or priesthood, there can be neither sacrifices or these kinds of things. These depend on possession of the land. He never envisioned a situation where they would possess the land again. You see, so they never faced this issue. But personal commandments, duties imposed upon every son of Israel, which are unrelated to temple service, land ownership, and Palestine, must, as far as I can see, be observed. And so on and so forth. So he has, without realizing, an anticipated serious problem. Let me just keep you for 5 more minutes if I can. Now, next page. You, my brothers, and don't quote me on what I said about the temple. I don't know if it was historically possible, if it was strategically correct. I just think it's going to turn out to be a very spiritually and morale-wise undermining of the whole enterprise. And I'm not sure what the effect will find. I've got to go on here. I don't know what the effect will be. I hope I'm wrong and that what they did is the correct thing. But I'm not sure if it is the correct thing. I don't think that Rabbinic Judaism wanted to restore the sacrifice cult. I don't think they should restore the sacrifice cult. But there are modern ways to make things symbolically important without cutting animals' throats and things. Okay, and you, my brothers and fellow men who are followers of the teaching of Jesus, how can you blame us for doing what the founder of our religion himself has done and sanctioned by his authority? Can you seriously believe that you cannot reciprocate our love as citizens and associate yourselves with us for civic purposes, as long as we're outwardly distinguished from you by our ceremonial law, that is, whatever Hasidic Jews might look like, and do not eat with you and do not marry? As far as we can see, the founder of your religion himself would not have done these things or permitted us to do them either. He's basically saying to them, look, I don't think Jesus probably was any different than we are. If we can be united with you as citizens, here's his plea, you see. Only on the condition that we deviate from the law, which we still consider binding, then we sincerely regret the necessity of declaring that we shall renounce our claim to civil union with it. That is basically what Herzl says a century later. It's not that long. This is 1780s. Herzl is functioning in the late 1890s, beginning of the 1900s. Herzl saying, there's no hope here. We have to get out. And he's gripped by a passion because he sees a terrible disaster in the wings. And in that sense, he's terribly clear-sighted because he doesn't deceive himself. He thinks disaster is coming of unimaginable proportions, and any way that we can get the job done, he wants to get it done. It's called practical or political Zionism. Anyway, so he ends up here. Brothers, if you care for true godliness, let us not pretend that conformity exists without diversity. So he's getting to the point here. Rulers of the earth, if an important co-inhabitant may be permitted to lift his voice and address you, do not trust your counselors who in smooth phrases seek to mislead you into such harmful course of action, that is to bar people like us. Of course, that's exactly what finally happened in Germany, but not after a lot of tragedies that occurred like the First World War. Our most precious possession, the freedom to think, will be lost if you listen to that kind of counsel. For the sake of your happiness as well as ours, remember, a union of faiths is not tolerance. You cannot convert us, you have to tolerate us. And finally, at least prepare the way for your fortunate descendants, the last paragraph, to reach that height of culture, that universal human tolerance for which reason is still sighing in vain. Reward and punish no doctrine. Hold out no allurement or bribe to anyone for the adoption of a particular faith. Let every man who does not disturb the public welfare and who obeys the law, acts righteously towards you and his fellow man, be allowed to speak as he thinks, to pray to God after his own fashion or after the fashion of his fathers, and to seek salvation where he thinks it may be found. Permit no one in your country to search someone else's heart or to judge someone else's thought. Let no one usurp a right which his omniscient has reserved for himself. If we render unto Caesar, like Jesus is presented as saying, what is Caesar's, then let us render unto God what is God's. Love truth, love peace. Well, that's his plea for what? Toleration. He says, we are not harmful. Our legislation, which you consider peculiar, you're right, it only applies to us. We're not going to do you any harm by observing these things. If we observe our citizen rights and do our duties and so on and so forth, you have no complaints. And then he says, as Jesus is presented as saying, if you render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, then let us render unto God what is God's. And you see, the Jews did render unto Caesar what is Caesar's to the last iota during the Holocaust. They rendered up their whole being, their whole body, their whole everything. They did not resist to any great extent. They just went to their death in like almost a humble manner, resignation or whatever. And nothing could be more Christian than that. So I don't think Middleton foresaw what was coming. But I'll tell you this, Herzl saw what was coming. And next time, I didn't think we'd ever get through medicine, but we did. Next time, I want you to read this. We're going to do the Acts of the French Deputies. We're going to do the Israel Jacobson dedication address, the Association of Reformed Judaism, Abraham Geiger, all that kind of thing. And then maybe some stuff from Rudowski on the historical school, conservative Judaism, and so on. See you then. Thanks for your patience.